Hi, welcome to the video. If you go to the description below, there should be a link to the PDF that you see here, as well as the PDF you see here. It opens up off my Google Drive. And as usual, you have my permission to download as well. If you go in the upper right, it'll give you the option download. All right, so assuming you watched part one, where you now recognize, zoom in the questions that the disciple asked. And now, hopefully you see now that the questions, how they are directly connected to the statement Jesus made. There's no disconnect. You looked up the passages here. I already showed you in part one. You can see it results. It's a severe type of judgment that results in destruction and dead bodies already. And we see that right here. In Matthew 24. Chapter 24, verse 28. For wherever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Alrighty. So this is all directly connected to the destruction of the temple. Alright, all of this. Alrighty. The disciples asked questions. They're all Jews. This has to do with the Jews. Alright. And so, even though the word elect is used here, they're elect Gentiles and they're elect Jews, but either elect Jews has to do with destruction of the temple. All right, we have to keep it in topic here. All right, there's several things that were going on after this, or after the prophecy given. So first, we need to put in perspective when was this conversation taking place. So I have here. This is the day Jesus died. Alrighty, and then Nisan 14 is a day of Passover lamb. And 2 days before that, so this was in the Gregorian calendar, April 3rd, 30 AD. So you go 2 days before that. This is when the conversation took place in Matthew 24. Alrighty. So this was shortly before the crucifixion was going to take place. Alrighty. So we back up, and up here is, okay, I need to go over this a little bit. So this is the daily calendar here, marked by days in the Hebraic calendar, which is what the Jewish people used back then. And everything ties to their calendar stems from Genesis chapter 1. Alrighty. If you want to learn more about it, go to my videos, crucifixion date. Alrighty. So this is the daily calendar where you have the 3.5 days prior to crucifixion and 3.5 days after crucifixion. It's in sync to the 3.5 years prior to crucifixion and 3.5 years after the crucifixion. Alrighty. So this is the yearly calendar and it's the daily calendar. Alrighty. So, anyway, so they're having a conversation, Matthew 24 here, also Matthew 23 as well. So let's go to Matthew 23. When we look at Matthew 23, basically Jesus is at the temple expressing just great displeasure with the old covenant, and basically pointing out we need a new covenant, okay? And he's pointing out the things they don't like about it, and it all comes down to the heart of man. That's what it boils down to, this whole chapter. If we zoom in and out repeatedly, Matthew 23, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, keep going back and forth, you'll see what I'm talking about. Something you can do on your own time. And so, toward the end, Jesus says, "You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell?" Now, if you go earlier, just 20 chapters earlier, John the Baptist, he used the same kind of language, "You brood of vipers," alrighty. The axe already lay in the tree. Judgment is about to come. So he knew that they're going to murder Christ, alrighty. And Jesus here, 2 days before the crucifixion, knows he's going to get murdered, alrighty. And so, wherefore behold, I send you prophets and wise men, scribes. Some of them you kill and crucify. Some of you shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. That upon you, talking to the scribes and Pharisees, may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and altar. So what he's saying here, Christ gets murdered, they're going to be responsible for all the profit that leads up, that has to do, all the profit that has to do with Christ himself. Alright, so when you murder Christ, then you're guilty of all the blood, all the profits concerning him, concerning Christ. Alrighty, that's what he is saying here. Alrighty, and so Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. Now, near demonstrative used, referring to generation in front of them. Okay, near demonstrative right next to him. Okay, not talking about a future distant generation. Okay, that's going to murder him 2,000 years later. This is 2 days before his actual crucifixion. Okay, this generation, the near demonstrative, about to take place, the murder. Alrighty. So due to the murder, there's a judgment to take place. Alrighty. So, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that kill the prophets and stone them, which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children under, even as a hen gathered chickens under her wing, and ye would not. So again, it's the heart problem. All right, the heart of man has no desire to worship God, to glorify Him. Okay, it takes a change of heart by God that only God can do. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6. All right, that's a whole nother study. Okay, behold, your house is left unto you desolate. All righty. So you go back to, you remember that desolate. Go back to Daniel 9. All righty. 9:20. Daniel praying for the sins of the people. Right, that's what it's all about. All righty. And so we continue on. Verse 26. After the 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. The murder of Christ, alrighty, but not for himself and the people. Now, these are people that are responsible for the murder of Christ. Now, did they physically get down on him and pound the nails on? No, but they're responsible for it. Okay, big difference. Alrighty, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him! Let the blood be on our children. We have no king but Caesar." Okay, so they're responsible for it. Alrighty, that's very important. So the prince here, Messiah the prince, he came for his own, but his own received him not. Alrighty, they murdered him. Alrighty, so when Jesus go back up to the ancient days, he ascended to heaven. He goes back to ancient days. Now he's being the role of prince, which means ruler. Okay, and you look at John chapter 5. He says he has authority to execute judgment. Okay, so that's exactly what he does. He allowed their hearts to harden. Okay, let's go their hearts. Their hearts hardened. Romans chapter 11, verse 7. And they shall destroy the city and sanctuary. Did they physically destroy the city and sanctuary? No, but they're responsible for it. All right, same way responsible for the murder of Christ, they're responsible for the destruction of the city and sanctuary. How so? Their hearts were hardened so much to the point where they ticked off Nero, who was Caesar, and then he ordered Vespasian to destroy the city and sanctuary. He does. And then later on, he becomes emperor, and then his son takes over. Alrighty. So we go over here, back to here, zoom out. This actually continues on to part 2. So this is the murder of Christ. Now these two crosses are the same cross. Okay, it's not two different crosses. It's represented in each timeline, the daily calendar and the yearly calendar. Okay, just an FYI. All right, so the abominations, plural, which are the animal sacrifices that take place after the perfect sacrifice has already been made, which is considered an abomination. How so? Profanity of worship or false worship. We do a word study of abomination back in the Old Testament. You see what I'm talking about. Okay, it's important that we know that before we get to the New Testament. The problem is the large majority of Christians, they read the New Testament, they don't go back to the Old Testament, and they're missing out. They're only getting like half a picture, a third of a picture, a quarter of a picture. You have to go back to the Old Testament first, fully understand the key words like abomination before you go in the New Testament. Alrighty? Then that really helps. I found it helped me anyway. Alrighty? So now the animal sacrifice is taking place. It goes on and on. Alrighty? And continue to part 2. And continuing on, it's the red line, continuation of it. And then it stops right here, right in August. Oops. In August of 66 A.D. There we go. Right here, August 6 A.D. The assassination of sacrifice begins, which starts the countdown for Book of Daniel, chapter 12, 11 to 13. Alrighty, the 1335 days and the 1290 days. Then you have the singular abomination, desolation, which the man who's in the temple of God. And 45 days later, actually the countdown begins. Then 45 days later, then they flee. Alrighty. So you had here the tribulation that had to do with destruction of the temple here, there's different tribulation that had to do with the persecution of Christians here. There are two different tribulations that were going on. Alrighty. So Matthew 24 had to do with the Jewish people and the tribulation there with the destruction of the temple. Again, going back to the question that the disciples asked, had to do with the destruction of the temple. So that's what's going on here. Alrighty. Now the reason why this line here is not perfectly straight up, because there's so much information being packed into 70 AD. There's so much that happened there. So you can read about the tribulation here. It was horrific. Their mothers were eating their own children. The famine was so bad. It was very bad times. But what's interesting here, if you back up a little bit, Jesus said, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So, a generation in one sense has to do with people. There's also a length of time associated with it. So today when we say generation, it typically means 20 years to us. But to them, it meant 40 years, okay? So click on this here. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel. And this is going back to number 32:13. This is not directly pertinent to 70 AD, but however, it's directly parallel, okay? And he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years. Okay, that's your length of time right there, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was consumed, alrighty? What's interesting about this, from the time, okay, so there's the 40 years, and then right down to the hour, the flood came, Daniel 9:26, or the siege, and wiped them out. It was consumed, alright? So let's go back to that calendar, the daily calendar, this 30 AD, okay? So Jesus died. He gave us prophecy here. Okay, Matthew 24. Alrighty. Jesus died here, and you have what's called a feast of the unleavened bread. Okay, so it starts in the evening on the 14th, and it goes into the 15th. Nisan 14, which is in the Hebraic calendar. Nisan 14 is the 14th day of the year. Nisan is the first month of the Hebraic calendar. Okay. And it's absolutely imperative we use the Hebraic calendar because that's what they used the entire time. It stems from Genesis chapter 1. I go over in my video, Crucifixion Date. I strongly encourage you to watch that, get more insight if you haven't already, the Hebraic calendar and how it works. Okay. So anyway, they had the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is 30 AD, and it bleeds over into Nisan 14. Okay. Exactly 40 years later, in the Hebraic calendar, not down to just a month, not down just to the week, not down just to the day, but down to the very hour. That's when the siege began, or the flood. Okay, let's go back to Daniel 9:27. Daniel 9:26. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. That started right 40 years later. Let's take a look at that exact date. So it Passover, 70 AD. Nisan 14, obviously. It was April 11th, 70 AD. Evening of Passover, siege flood began. Okay, it was right down to the hour that the flood came in, which is parallel to this again. Number 32:13. You had the 40 years. Right, that hour expired. 40 years, exactly 40 years later, till all that generation had done evil in the sight of the Lord was consumed, and that's when the flood came in. Where basically the soldiers came storming in. They were just slaughtering everybody. Alrighty. Obviously there are some hiding bases, but if they're slaughtering everybody, slicing their throat, they're going after the gold and precious metals, and they're basically competing against each other. And while evidently the temple is burning, I believe so, if I remember right. So yeah. Anyway, so that's what's going on. It was a tribulation. This period here, from the time Nero declared war on Jerusalem, he ordered Vespasian to destroy the temple. And over time, you had in 69 AD, the year before emperor, Vespasian becomes emperor. Then he hands over to his son Titus to finish it off. Alrighty. So when we go here and talk about the prince, this is not Titus. Alrighty. This is certainly not Antichrist. Okay. We follow basic rule of grammar. We talk about Messiah the prince. We're still talking about Messiah the Prince, okay, next verse, and we're still talking about Messiah the Prince here, here about Messiah the Prince. So all three verses, the same main subject all the way through. It does not change. The basic rule of grammar is not allowed to change, and when we try to change it, that means our theology, our context of understanding does not fit what's going on here. Anytime you break basic rules of grammar like that, if you start superimposing something else to turn into the Prince here into an X value and say, I'm going to make this Antichrist, or I'm going to make this Titus, or whatever, when there's no mention of any such thing, the subject has already been provided right here, Messiah the Prince. Alrighty. Once it's already provided, you cannot change that. Alrighty. So, again, the people here, I don't want that murdered him. They don't want to be responsible for it. Not that they murdered him directly or physically, but they're responsible for it to Pilate. Alrighty. These same people are responsible for the destruction of the city and the sanctuary. Not that they physically destroyed it, but they're responsible for it. They ticked off Nero, and Nero then ordered Vespasian to destroy the temple and the city. Alrighty. And so the Prince here is still Messiah, the Prince. Alrighty. Alright. Hope that makes sense. So anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at let's see here. Where was it? For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So when we look at that, we think it's the greatest tribulation ever, right? The problem here is Jesus is talking to the disciples when he says this. They're familiar with the type of language. You typical Christian who dives in this for the first time, they're not. And they tend to try to substitute with their understanding of what's going on and then run forward with it. Let's take a look at their history, how they would have understood it. So I have here, please see note below. Alrighty. For then there will be great distress or tribulation, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. So we look at Exodus, the same type of language is used here. Let's click on that. So moreover, there should be a great cry in all the land of Egypt, such as there has not been before, and such as shall never be again. Alrighty. This is a common language amongst Jewish people, describe great calamity to make them mentally alert what's about to take place. Alrighty, let's go to Ezekiel 5:9. And because of all your abominations, I will do among you what I have not done, and the like which I will never do again. Again, same type of language. Alrighty. Now, abominations, I strongly encourage you to do a word study on in the Old Testament. It really helped me. Problem is, when we only read the New Testament, we're not looking at the Old Testament, the background behind it. You're not getting a full picture. You might be getting a quarter of a picture, a third of a picture, a half a picture, but you're not going to get a full picture. Alrighty, and that's why I see time and time again with a lot of believers, they're not getting the full picture. In Daniel 9:12, another example, thus he has confirmed his words which he had spoken against us and against our rulers who ruled us, to bring on us great calamity. For under the whole heaven there had not been anything, and had not been done anything like what was done to Jerusalem. Alrighty, same type of language. Alrighty. So if we look at these passages, including the Great Flood, you cannot have four different tribulations being the greatest ever. This is simply common phraseology to describe the great calamity. This phrase is to be interpreted with wooden literalism, like many do, then this means there will be a future tribulation with less than 8 people remaining, since only 8 people survived the flood during the no time. Alrighty. Now, when I say future, future in their time. Alrighty, not our future, but their future. Alright. So, yeah. So as you can see here, it's highly problematic if you interpret it with wooden literalism. Alrighty. Alright. So hopefully that all makes sense. Yeah, so you can see here you have the murder of Jesus Christ, which results in judgment. Alrighty, which is over here, which has to do with this tribulation here. Not this one here. These are Christians, but these here are the ones that denied Christ coming to flesh, had to do with destruction of the temple, and all that. So, alright, so this resulted in the murder. Alright, so you can't murder most infinitely valuable human being on the face planet has ever existed, and think you're just going to get away with it. It just doesn't work that way. On one hand, it was needed for salvation, very, very true. On the other hand, you still have the judgment for doing so, for murdering. Thou shalt not murder, right? Alrighty, so hope you enjoy this material, and hope you continue doing your studies, and you have an awesome day. Thank you.